Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this extraordinary event, this anniversary. My name is Maureen Beattie. I'm the President of Equity. And today, remarkably, it's a year since our theatres were closed. This very odd year, which has felt as if all the hours have dragged like never before. They've been endless, and yet at the same time, they have flown by. Um, the purpose of tonight is to reflect on what's happened over the last 12 months, to tell the stories of our members, from those working in the West End, in the theatre in London, to the stories of all of our members working in pubs, clubs, hospitality, circuses, street theatre, all the kind of different venues that work in UK wide. We're going to hear from actors, variety artists, and from the creative team too, and from people, as I say, living and working in all four nations of the UK and all of the regions too. It's very important to us that tonight is not about looking back with sorrow, although we do that, of course, but it's also about looking forward and determining that we are going to fight back. We have been fighting back this whole year, and I have been, as president of this great union, I have been so moved and so inspired by the extraordinary courage and fortitude, which of course our members have in abundance anyway, whatever their discipline, but it has really come out, it's come to the fore this last year with the struggles that people have had just to feed themselves and their families, and to try to keep being creative and keep creating theatre despite the huge obstacles in our way. So we are going to develop the policy that we've started, the basic income guarantee for creative workers, very important, at the core of everything. We're going to be publicly campaigning and politically campaigning for action to end the crisis of insecurity faced by Equity members. And I hope that we will deliver a fair and dignified return to work for all of us, and with you, everyone who's joined us tonight, and also the people that I'm going to introduce now to speak to us about their personal experiences. I know that we can do this thing, and I know that we can overcome, as we always do. So thank you for joining us. And I'd like to now ask our first speaker. Oh, sorry, I should say that if you would like to have captions, the link will go into the comments section if you would like to, if you'd like to see them. Okay, so first up, we have an actor. His name is David Kirkbride, and he was in the phenomenally successful The Play That Goes Wrong. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Maureen. Hiya. So my name's David. I was lucky enough to be in the West End in The Play That Goes Wrong when the pandemic hit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it's been like, the impact of that lockdown, and what happened when the pandemic hit. The last few days before the lockdown last year, as we all know, were really strange. You know, theatre and other venues were never officially closed. So by the government, it was just an awkward situation for all. It had to be individual theatre decision to close before the major lockdown started on the Wednesday. So it was odd to be in the centre of town on the weekend before lockdown, and pubs were quiet, you know, closing early. But we were performing to relatively full houses while the government were encouraging people not to go to Les Mis, but not officially asking places to close. So it was utter chaos. And then when we did close, it was just months of madness. That initial month into lockdown, we were all talking on Zoom and stuff, all thinking maybe we'd be back after the summer, which obviously we weren't. From our point of view, it became, because of the nature of contracts in theatres, nobody in the theatres were on furlough. And I say this because it's a myth that I still have to debunk today. People who are not in the arts just don't understand. My friends and family were so confused, and still are, because they all just assumed that actors and technical staff who were working would be put on furlough due to the length of contracts, but no, nothing. So it became then the hope that we could maybe get some help from the government, but that took forever, as we all know. And unfortunately, it only helped a few. Our cast is quite young, apart from old farts like myself. We have a lot of new graduates in lead roles and understudy roles, and lots of these cast members fell between the cracks of help. They couldn't get a grant due to tax returns and stuff, and couldn't get a job due to the pandemic, along with nearly 40% of equity members who all suffered the same fate. And there's also the fact that most of the self-employed grants didn't even start to scratch the surface in terms of rents and bills, not just in London where it's extortionate anywhere, but everywhere. And nearly all of us in the cast had to either move back home or we relied on our partners to help us out. I think it was nearly kind of 58% of equity members said that the grants weren't nearly enough to help them survive, and we're still in that position now. I know personally I've been much more of a vocal equity member over the pandemic. I took over equity dep duties on my show, and I've been pushing hard to make sure that when we do come back that we're treated right. Equity have been massively helpful during all of this. We've been actively kind of using the connections and the reps in other casts to try and make a difference going forward. Not just with contracts and decisions with the future shows, but the stuff in between, and that's been tough. There's lots of producers, not ones that I'm now working for, but there are lots of other producers and theatres that are asking people to, work more for less money. They are using the pandemic for a reason to undercut performers and artists in a way that we've not seen in years. So it has been hellish, but I think together we have a hell of a lot more sway, and I've learned that over these past 12 months. Because I think when you're moving from job to job, I think it's sometimes easy to forget how important we are as a union and together, and that as a cast you can make a difference. The fact that theatres are starting to reopen as well, and these members are in a really vulnerable position, I feel like these kind of talks and these kind of chats are massive, and we only need to do more and more of them. And not just in London. I'm very lucky to be in the play that goes wrong, and hopefully to be coming back if the roadmap goes ahead. But I'm from Teesside, and I'm lucky enough to have worked with art venues all around that area, like Northern Stage in Newcastle, and the Arc and Georgian Theatre in Stockton, which is right next to where I live, where I'm from, in Thornaby. And the threat to those regional theatres is massive. I always knew it was true, but I think this pandemic has shown millions of people just how important theatre and the arts is to the lifeblood of most towns and cities. And yet we've gotten so used to just being in the same old grind with auditions and castings, always happening in London due to the lack of diversity and stuff, and the use of local knowledge in beautiful areas like Middlesbrough or Stoke or Glasgow, that we overlook regional artists and venues. And I feel that's where our support needs to be now. Being active in those areas, being aware that people don't need to live in the centre of London and spend all the savings and wages, just surviving, but also that London isn't necessarily where all the best theatre is. There's brilliant and exceptional theatre happening up and down the country, and it needs just as much support as the West End. And I'd argue it's going to be more important for communities and people after this pandemic. I hope that with shows streaming and touring work, the accessibility and ease of being able to enjoy these shows continues afterwards, as long as there's money and funding there to do it, that you can have the option to go to a sold out run of something in home at Manchester, or you could watch it streamed if you're stuck at home with a baby in Cornwall, that those options are still available after this finishes. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up now. This is kind of the warm-up act for brilliant people who are coming up afterwards. I just know that the pandemic's taught me the importance of being together as a union, to be open and a collective to help each other, and the importance of theatres outside of London and supporting them, and that general feeling that things need to change massively in terms of diversity and outreach and support, so that we can find, when we do get back on stage, we're in a better position and a more inclusive and safe environment for everyone. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. All the best.
Thank you very much indeed, David. A fabulous warm-up act for the rest of our speakers. The next person up, it was my great privilege to serve on council with this man. He was our variety councillor. He hails from Newcastle, so I'd like very much to introduce you to Steve Mcguire.
Thank you, Maureen. It's so lovely to see you again tonight, Madam President. Good evening to all. I'm delighted to have been asked to speak tonight and share my experiences and the effects that the COVID pandemic have had on me as an entertainer, as a singer, musician, compere, walk on, or as anything that falls under the variety umbrella. So what's my story? My dream and ambition was always to be a singer and a musician. So at an early age, I learned to play an instrument. And I joined a band and started performing in the pubs and clubs of the Northeast way back in the 1970s. When I left school, I started working in a sweet factory. I painted the colours on the Smarties in the northeast, and I worked in what's considered as a proper job. I worked there for over 11 years, and when I was made redundant, I then took the opportunity to, and the plunge, to embark upon a full-time career in entertainment. And in 1990, I joined the Northeast Variety branch of Equity. So, I've been truly blessed to being able to work in a profession that I love for over 30 years. And I've worked all over this country in net deals in South Wales and Blackpool in the Northwest, Scotland, the Midlands, Yorkshire, North and South. And I spent 5 very happy years in Spain as an entertainment manager in summer season. Now, even with the decline in workmen's clubs and pubs, and let's be honest, those are our bread and butter jobs and venues in variety. Even with that decline, I've still been able to maintain a decent diary, enough to keep me away from factory work. And so last year, I was looking at a decent year's work, including comp-pen performing at 6 country music festivals, a diary full of club and pub work, thanks to my Northeast agents, and a private diary of PA and lighting hire until March 23rd of last year, when I remember sitting in front of the TV in shock, listening to Boris Johnson announcing that the country is going into lockdown, that pubs, clubs and entertainment venues had to close their doors. And I phoned my agent, and he was looking at the same broadcast, and simultaneously we just closed the diaries. So as a self-employed entertainer, I wasn't entitled to any furlough payments. My wife was working, so I didn't qualify for any universal credit. I eventually received a pittance from the self-employed assistance scheme, and I have to say that I was very, very grateful for a grant from the Equity Benevolent Fund, which I will always be eternally grateful for. And then we saw a glimmer of hope in June last year, when we were allowed to open for a 6-week period with strict conditions such as social distancing, curfews, track and trace systems in place. And you know what? It worked very well. But then they shut us down again, just in time for our most lucrative and busiest time of the year. And, even though my wife was working on a 0 hours contract, even though she's working, it's still a massive drop in income when a partner loses their earnings. And so soon our savings dwindled when we had to effect emergency repairs to our home. And even though we were able to take a 3-month mortgage holiday, it soon became apparent that we were going to have to sell that house in order to recover, which we ended up having to do in November of last year. That's been the biggest change for us, having to sell our house, which we'd invested in for our retirement, if you like. Well, I've since found another proper job. I'm back working in a factory on a national minimum wage. And, whether our workplaces will recover or not remains to be seen. And I'm talking about variety workplaces. I'm talking about the clubs and pubs who've had to shut the doors. Working men's clubs and pubs have been the traditional live entertainment venues for the working class in the country. In those industrial areas that we come from, you're more likely to have seen top entertainment in a working man's club than spend an evening in the theatre. It's traditional working man's live entertainment. And I'm fearful that many of the problems that those venues have been facing have now been compounded by the pandemic. And so many of those venues were struggling beforehand. I'm fearful that they're going to struggle to reopen their doors again. And as for our members working in this precarious profession, yes, we need a safeguard. Yes, we need, as a society, some sort of basic income, universal basic income to protect us all. Our members aren't lazy. They want to work. It's just that they work in a profession that's entirely different to those who sometimes denigrate us by asking, so you don't have a proper job then, do you not? And if that proper job means a job that provides furlough payments and sickness pay, maternity and paternity pays, holiday pay, double time for work and bank holidays, so on and so forth, then no, we don't have a proper job. So, President, you know that I've always banged this drum. It's time that we looked as a profession and campaigned as a trade union for those safeguards to such as universal basic income. And it's going to come as no surprise to you, President, and to Paul, that I'm asking again for us to explore as a trade union a way in which we in the variety sector can be afforded some of those protections provided by collective bargaining agreements. We need them. We've got to find a way around it. I know we've been there before. We need to revisit and we need to find a way around it. Otherwise, variety artists are going to be continuously part of that 3 million excluded UK members. Thank you all for listening to me.
Steve, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you sharing that story with us. I'm so sorry to hear the way this has impacted you. Such a talented man, as so many of our members are. I should say to everyone that Paul Fleming, our General Secretary, has now joined us, and he's going to speak at the end of this event. First, now we have our next speaker is Emma Jane Park. Emma Jane is a dancer and a theatre maker. She's also a member of the Freelancers Make Theatre Work community. Over to you, Emma Jane.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm going to start by saying it's really hard to be here tonight because I'm exhausted, and I'd prepared a lovely little rally cry talking about poverty and the Barnett formula and well-being economies, and I can share all of that later. But all day I've swithered about what to talk about, and I just think all of that is redundant after a week of watching familiar abuses of power play out again and again in the mainstream media, and watching people who I know to be abusers spout platitudes online on the back of that. And so I really questioned if my energy is relevant tonight, but I think it is, because if I can rally everyone watching this to be raging about platitudes, I really think that the idea of a basic income guarantee for creative workers stands a chance to make an actual change. So with that, I'm going to fast track to the difficult bits. And I would like to assure you that for me, this is an act of love. It could be because I'm from the west coast of Scotland that the tricky bits are seen as an act of love. But I firmly believe that if we don't ask each other the hard questions, then our critics certainly will, and they're far more likely to use them to tear us apart. So for me, comradeship is not about endless agreement. It is about space to embrace all of the complex issues without falling into them in us politics. And if we can't achieve this in our union, then what is the point of a union that we call equity? So tonight, I would like to offer that perpetuating financial precarity is one of the greatest enablers of the misuse of power in our society and therefore our industry. It leads to discrimination, it leads to abuse and violence, both individually and institutionally. And we currently live in a society that exhausts people into submission through fear and through scarcity. And if we're really honest with ourselves tonight, those who are subjugated as a free labour source by our society, so I'm thinking the working class, the underclass, the criminal class, carers, women, people who experience racism, and disabled communities, to name a few, those are the people who've left the industry already. And those are the people who aren't here with us tonight and who need this basic income guarantee the most. And every inch of the optimist in me wants to believe that this income guarantee will create the financial security that enables activists to gather and pool energy around building a more equitable industry. And I totally wonder at the opportunity for healing that kind of resource could bring. However, the realist in me worries, and I worry deeply, like keeping myself up at night worrying, because I've seen the platitudes. I've repeatedly witnessed promising policies being used to shut down conversations about the abuse of power. And as someone who started their career in the fallout from the New Labour years, I have repeatedly seen ladders pulled up in front of me by people who had far more privilege than myself before anyone else I know can get a hand to them. And tonight I want us to burn those ladders down, and an income guarantee is a step in the right direction. I think we also burn those ladders by redistributing power. And I'd offer tonight that the world is not run by those who distribute the resources, given that this income would be a resource. It is run by the people who appoint the people who distribute those resources. I have no doubts this income guarantee will happen. Securing it is the easy bit. How it is rolled out will be the marker of its value and our true investment in equity as a principle. So I am here tonight with all of my rage to call us into action, because I think we need to be active in starting the conversation around how a basic income guarantee would be distributed, ensuring that those who experience the greatest financial precarity are central to that conversation. And to do this, we need to consider and recognise that our current version of democracy is broken. If 80% of a room votes for a decision, it might seem equitable. But if that decision is about financial precarity, and the 80% is financially stable and from a world of inherited wealth, and the 20% who voted against it are those who have experienced extreme poverty, that is a red flag. And decisions like this happen daily on our watch. I'd offer that I've seen those red flag moments repeatedly in our industry, and I'd offer that I've seen them in our union. But I'm here because I believe in the industry, and I really believe in our union, and I believe that our union wants to do better. So how do we build the systems that don't continue to ignore the red flags? How do we build systems whereby those who raise concern are not labelled as dissenting voices? And how do we listen and learn from those most impacted and recognise that changing our minds when more information is available is the truest act of comradeship we can offer? So tonight, as we think about this basic income guarantee that I want to get behind, I want everyone to ask themselves, are you here listening and interested in campaigning because you want to campaign for your own comfort, or are you campaigning for a system that leaves no one behind? How will you feel if a basic guarantee is secured, but you are not part of the few that receives it? What will you campaign for then? And if you are part of the few who do receive it, will you genuinely continue to fight and listen to those who are more vulnerable than you? And lastly, as we campaign for a basic income guarantee for creative workers, how can we really imagine it as an opportunity to heal and an opportunity to genuinely do better instead of propping up the systems that we all know lead to abuses of power and have done for years? I feel positive. I don't sound it, but that's the West Coast of Scotland in me coming out again, because I genuinely think we can do it. It's going to be tricky, but I'm willing to do it with everyone if you are too.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma Jane. I don't say this lightly, but I believe that with people like you on our side, as we march forward together, we can do this thing. And it's incredibly important for our union's health that we listen to the hard stuff as well as the nice stuff. So thank you so much. Our next speaker is Jasa Aluwalia. He is an actor, writer, and filmmaker. And he is a member of Equity's Race Equality Committee. Very, very busy person, fantastic. And he's also on our self-tape working party. Over to you, Jasa.
Thank you very much. Well, what an act to follow. Emma Jane, thank you so much. That was an incredible speech. A year ago today, I was shooting series 4 of Unforgotten. I just moved to a new agent and was looking ahead to a productive year. And then on the evening of the 17th of March, as I waited for my call sheet, I received an email. It said, we are declaring an event of force majeure and suspending production with immediate effect. Our production will be shut down for a period of not less than 2 weeks, and we'll reassess this time period as we go. Payments due for services rendered up to today's date will be honoured. Like so many of us, my career plans were suddenly on hold, but I was lucky. I only had 1 day left to shoot and I was paid. However, those of you who have been watching Unforgotten will know that my role isn't the kind of role that keeps you going all year long. But I was lucky again. I qualified for the self-employed income support scheme. I don't think it can be repeated enough that over 40% of our members have not received help from the scheme, and 58% of those who did have said it was not enough to meet their needs. Indeed, being a young male actor just emerging from the wilderness of my limbo years, no longer quite young enough to play a teenager, not yet old enough to be considered an adult, my average income had taken a hit, which was reflected in the support that I did receive. But then I discovered something rather wonderful. An unexpected and not insignificant payment hit my bank account in July. The statement from my agent referred to it as a second call payment. I had no idea what it was, so I did some digging. and discovered it was the result of clause T45 of the Equity Pact TV agreement. It basically states that a producer must pay an artist £105 a week to retain them on a project that has been shut down by an event of force majeure. This is what equity does. This provision has been in place since 1994, and the financial arrangements have been renegotiated every year since. Our union enshrined and continues to fight for the need for artists to be paid, even in the event of circumstances beyond a producer's control. Now, I draw attention to this because I think it's important to remember that these agreements are hard won, and Equity is uniquely placed as a legal entity to negotiate these details. We're not simply a pressure group, we are a trade union. This is the granular work that goes on behind the scenes, the work that goes unnoticed until we need it. As members, our subscription payments support this kind of essential work and so transform our industry for the better for us all. And that is the work that we must now be doing, just on a much grander scale. It's for that reason that I give my full support to Equity's call for a basic income guarantee. This is not some pipe dream. It is essential to the recovery of our industry and to ensure that no arts worker is left behind. Crises reveal a society's strengths and weaknesses and change thinking about how society can and should be organised. Between late 2019 and late 2020, there's been a 44% drop in BAME female workers in the arts sector. That's appalling. Our weaknesses have been revealed. We have to change our thinking. Now, we're all aware that the arts are plagued by inequity and instability, driving away those from underrepresented groups, compounding the historical problem of elitism. A basic income guarantee for arts workers has the power to provide much needed security, and Equity, armed with its legal powers as a trade union with direct access to legislators, is uniquely placed to lead the charge. As revolutionary as this campaign may sound to some, this is not a new debate. In the late 1700s, Thomas Paine was arguing for a form of universal income. And more recently, reports from a basic universal income trial in Kenya suggest higher levels of well-being and increased entrepreneurship among recipients. And France has had a system in place, an art system in place to support artists for years. We are part of a long-running dialogue, but we must now raise our voices. Now, the question we always face when trying to engage members and would-be members is, what does Equity actually do? Let this campaign be a resounding reply. Equity is fighting for a basic income guarantee, a guarantee for a better future, a future defined not by uncertainty and indignity, but by security and equality. It needs your input, it needs your support. Collective action works. Please get involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasa, for that rallying cry. Much appreciated. We now have Francis Meza, who is in Northern Ireland. He is the chair of the Northern Ireland General Branch. He's an actor, and he is also on the Young Members Committee. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you, Maureen. Hello, friends. Hello, comrades. My name's Francis. As Maureen said, I'm an actor from Belfast, and I'm very proud to be the current chair of Equity's Northern Ireland General Branch, as well as being a member of Equity's Young Members Committee. I'm honoured to have been given the opportunity to speak to you all today, but unfortunately, the reason that I'm here is to highlight the devastating impact of COVID-19 on our members here in the north of Ireland. As we know only too well, our industry has been crushed due to the impact of COVID-19. And sadly, it's been our freelance creatives who have suffered the most. 2020 was my first year as a member of Equity's Northern Ireland General Branch Committee. And like many trade unionists, our committee found ourselves in a scenario where a trusted member of staff who we relied on had to be placed on furlough, and we had to start holding meetings online. But we adjusted, as all artists do. Artists adapt, and they do the best that they can in often difficult circumstances. But the difficulties that we faced as a branch committee were really only minor inconveniences. They were nothing when we compare them to the difficulties that many of our members have faced all across these islands over the past year. Many people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods over the past 12 months. And many people have even had to consider leaving an industry that they had to make massive sacrifices to be a part of in the first place. But it's also been inspiring to see how the arts community in the north of Ireland have come together to support each other during this difficult and often traumatic period. Despite what some elected representatives wanted us to believe last March, this pandemic has not been a great leveler. Some people are worse off than others, and some industries have been completely ignored by the UK government. Indeed, creative workers haven't always been high on the agenda of the Northern Ireland Executive at Stormont either. Despite that though, artists in Northern Ireland have come together. I've personally been inspired by the work that our national committee here have been involved in over the past year. And I've also been impressed with the work that many freelance theatre workers and activists have been involved in by organising themselves to stand in solidarity to challenge the status quo for creatives. Now, local theatre companies here have thought of new ways to support artists, and some are offering pay what you can workshops to help creatives express themselves and learn new skills. And we've also seen many online productions come to fruition for which local theatre and dance companies deserve great credit. Today's event isn't simply an anniversary though. Today's event is also the launch of Equity's campaign for a basic income guarantee for creative workers, which is urgently needed to protect workers against the current crisis and ensure that everyone can remain in the industry during these turbulent times, not just those with financial backing and security to do so. I'm proud that as a union, we're following Irish Equity, who have already been successful in lobbying Irish ministers in calling for a basic income scheme for artists and arts workers in the Republic of Ireland. And I want to reiterate that our campaign for a basic income guarantee for creative workers has probably been born in part because of the failings of the UK government's self-employed income support scheme, which has left many freelance creatives without an income. It's only right that I also take this opportunity to thank organisations such as the Arts Council for Northern Ireland and Theatre and Dance CNI, who have both been working extremely hard to support creative workers over the past 12 months in Northern Ireland. But many creative workers where I come from would probably be really unhappy with me if I didn't also mention that those of us who work in the creative industries have been treated with contempt by the UK government over the course of the past year. If your name is Fatima, for example, your next job does not need to be in cyber. If you're a ballerina, you should not have to wait or go to the back of the queue. And as we come out of this current period of restrictions, we should not need to be asking why air travel is deemed to be safe, while sitting in a socially distanced theatre space is not. For our industry to recover from this crisis, our members need meaningful and reliable financial support. I support a basic income guarantee for creative workers. And should some of our political parties decide to support a campaign for universal basic income for all workers, then I'll support that as well. The arts generate billions of pounds in this part of the world. And it's about time that was recognised by treating creative workers with the same level of respect that every single citizen deserves. Without a basic income guarantee for creative workers, the show really can't go on. It's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow, so I want to leave you with a phrase that the Irish President Michael D. Higgins liked to use. He says, "Bear bua agus bannacht." Bear bua means grasp victory, bannacht's a blessing, so bear bua.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Francis. It's lovely to hear someone from our Northern Ireland membership as well. Our next member is, I think, might be joining us from her workplace. She's an actress. Her name is Reiki Aola, and she is also on the board of the Actors Children's Trust. Reiki.
Hello, hello, hello. I managed to get home. Hello, thank you for inviting me along. Wow, amazing stuff, and I almost didn't. I'm sat here and I'm listening and thinking, I'm not sure if I want to speak. I just want to digest what I'm hearing. But when I was asked to take part in this rally, I was listening to the radio, and there was a song from Matilda on, and I was singing along, and then I suddenly thought, where are the children who a year ago thought they were going to be in a show, or where are the children who were in a show? I thought, I wonder where the children are. I wonder if, and then suddenly it all stopped, as it did for everybody, and I thought, I wonder where they are now. And so my thoughts went to, I hope they're okay, and I hope in the middle of everything that people have had to deal with, that somebody went, you know what, we need to check the kids are okay. because they are, in some cases, working as hard as the adults for considerably less. So I hope they're all right. And that led me to thinking about actors with children, because I have what I consider an honour to be a trustee of the Actors Children's Trust, and I've never been more. I've never considered that a bigger honour than I have in the last year because of all that we've had to do, and thanks to the generosity of the donors to ACT, we've been giving COVID crisis grants, which are £300 a month, so it's not a massive amount, but I know that for a lot of our families, it's the difference between paying a bill or not paying a bill, particularly for those of our beneficiaries who haven't been able to get any grants from anywhere else, haven't been eligible for whatever reason. And so for us as a charity, that's led to £54,000 a month that we're giving in grants. So over the year, it's a total of £1,100,000. And that's aside from the usual support and advice that ACT give. And as I say, it's £300, but we know for a fact that for some people that's the difference between them feeding themselves and their children, or just their children. So we've seen from that end how difficult it's been for people, and myself. So personally, I have been in an incredibly privileged position, and I'm absolutely aware of that. I went into lockdown exactly a year ago. I was meant to start filming a series called The Pact, and it was meant to start the first Monday of lockdown, but I knew it would be out there somewhere. And then there was also Grace for ITV that was meant to start 5 weeks later. So I went into lockdown knowing that when the world opened up, something would happen. Very different position to hundreds of other people. And then TV did open up, and so in September I had 2 TV jobs to go to. So it's really through being a trustee of Actors Children's Trust and the experience of my friends, a lot of my dear friends, that I know how bad it could have been. And so I'm very, very aware of that. And I received my first equity card from the Cardiff and South Wales branch in 1989, and I feel like it would be wrong of me not to say that that my relationship with equity has been complicated over the years. Not exactly love-hate, but it's been difficult. I don't know if I expected too much from the union, but I often felt disappointed. And today, I feel like we're represented by a union that is really trying to make change, that is not simply trying to maintain the status quo. So I think that the call for the basic living income for those in the arts is something to get behind. And I mentioned that to a couple of people, and one person said to me, well, that's not a new idea. No. And then someone else said, well, that's a very big idea. And I said, yes, because it's big, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And I listened very closely to what Emma was saying, and I think that I personally, and I am only speaking for myself, would have no problem at all knowing that other people were getting an income that I didn't have if I didn't need it. But that's that's a personal thing. But I also think if it's strangely easier to make sure that everybody gets it so that somebody gets it, I just think if it can work in other places, I don't know why it can't. And it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense that people who've worked and trained and honed their skills and their talent through no fault of their own, then find that they can't do the thing they do and that they're just having to leave the profession in droves. It's painful. But having said that, I do think that as we open up, we really need to, as the arts open up, we need to really be honest with ourselves about how we treat each other. If we can't really expect anybody else to treat us well as a profession if we don't treat ourselves well, and we often don't treat ourselves well. And I think one of the positive things that might have come out of this last year is hopefully no one will hear ever again. No one should ever hear the words, "Are you sure you're not well enough to come in? Are you sure you're not well enough to go on?" That should be a red card. Just don't say it anymore. Don't say it. Why have we got that culture? It can't happen anymore. I hope that we would clamp down hard on that. And I think it's a shame that it's taken a global pandemic for us to go, okay, actually, you know what? People don't have to freeze in the winter. I don't care how old the building is. People don't have to boil in the summer. I don't care how old the building is. I don't care. It's not right. Let's treat ourselves well. And then we can go forward and ask other people to treat us well. We treat ourselves appallingly. And maybe that's where my issue with the union has come in, because I feel like that stuff's been allowed to slide. I think people really have been emotionally blackmailed and told if they don't turn up with their cough and they're barely their voice, the show can't go on, and thousands of people who've traveled from all over the world will have to go home. Let's stop that. Let's stop it. It's not my fault if you haven't employed enough people, okay? It's not my fault if your insurance doesn't cover this. And we can't do it now because I don't want to be anywhere near someone with a hacking cough as I have been in the past. I just don't want to. Sitting in a dressing room with someone with a handkerchief over their over my face because they're coughing. You know, someone I love and respect who shouldn't be in the building because they're ill. Let's not do it. Let's not do it. Another thing that lockdown has brought into real sharp focus for me is that performers and artists often have no agency, no voice at all within arts organisations. That's got to change. That's got to change. Because the art can't happen without us. And that's not arrogance, it's fact. The art cannot happen without us. And yet, and I know equity represents a lot of people, but the bottom line is, how many artists and performers have been on furlough this year? Where have we been? We're not in the room where stuff happens. We have no agency at all. Doesn't make sense. Schools don't function without teachers. They're just buildings. So I would hope that going forwards, every entity that calls itself an artistic organization, an arts organization, would be thinking about putting some performers, some artists on the payroll. We need to be on the payroll. You need a couple of us on the payroll. I'm tired of the Zoom calls where I meet some fantastic people who are the producer and the producer's assistant and the producer's assistant's assistant. We need some artists and some performers on the payroll. Thank you.
Ricky, thank you very much. Another great call to arms, and I am sorry that you had a difficult time with equity in the past, but thank you for feeling we're doing better now. And with people like yourself keeping us right, we will continue to, I hope, get better and better and better. Thank you so much, and thank you very much, of course, for your work with the Actors Children's Trust, which has just been, as you said, I mean, the entire difference for some people. I just need to say that we've got 3 speakers left, and we may well be about to have some technical difficulties. We are coping with them as best we can, but I just want to let everybody know that if you suddenly, this all goes dark and we disappear into the ether, the entire event will be available on YouTube later on. So let's forge ahead while we can. Our next speaker is Lizzie Cooper, who is a stage manager, and I believe that Lizzie might be, oh, there you are, Lizzie, hello. It might be beaming in straight from work, or possibly still at work, I'm not sure. Welcome, Lizzie.
Thank you. Yes, I am tucked away in a corner in a rehearsal room, and I will apologize for the lighting and the echo. Last year I was interviewed for a national newspaper as part of the company of Leopoldstadt, which was the show I was working on when the theatre was closed. And I was asked how it felt to not be doing my job. I naively responded with a turn of phrase I never thought would make it into the article, but I meant it sincerely. Not being able to do my job was a kick in the fanny, not least in thanks to the periodical thumps from the government and its treasury failing to find any level of parity between the furlough scheme and those not eligible for it. From those who fell through the cracks to forgetting 2 months of the self-employed grant last autumn, or the current delay to the 4th round, all seemingly because of our self-employed status, like we're a lower class of worker. Stage managers are skilled and intelligent members of a company. We offer invaluable expertise. And whilst we're not always visible, we're always there when you need us. I can't speak for all stage managers about what it is that we get out of a job like this, but whatever that something it is, it keeps bringing us back. And for the most part, we have been, like everyone else in the industry, patient and waiting. But what we're seeing is experienced and brilliant stage managers leave the industry because of the last year. And it's a crying shame that we're losing so many. But with that time and distance from our jobs, discussions have started to emerge that some stage managers no longer want to go back to the workloads that were industry standards and accept that we must relearn the high tolerance workloads we've built ourselves up to apparently just handle previously. And those concerns aren't unfounded. There are already adverts out there for stage managers to be doing the workload of many other roles for far less money than is worth getting out of bed for. When budgets are squeezed, it tends to be stage management teams that take on more and more. That not only puts pressure on us, it also endangers other jobs in the industry that are just as invaluable and skilled as ours. Why would any stage manager want to come back to that, knowing their working lives are going to be even more pressured? We should be able to return to work without the fear that our roles will have had a shopping list of new expectations added to that we didn't sign up for. And on the other end of the scale, and against what I can see as any kind of reasoned judgment, we've seen permanent stage management roles made redundant. In one case, an entire theatre stage management department thrust into redundancy, with their jobs and responsibilities chopped up and divided out to other departments left in the building, like their knowledge of and experience in the building is completely worthless. Another concern we have on the committee is for those starting out in the industry, and I salute any recent stage management graduates that are persevering through this. They are entering an industry that is vulnerable and underfunded and probably understaffed if producers can make use of the 2 stage management team rule. Until social distancing is no longer required, we're all going to have less job security or prospects with lower pay. Without having alternative sources of income to fall back on, it makes it hard to maintain a career, and that's especially hard when you're starting out. And that was already a problem, but if it's made more difficult for people to access the industry, then that will directly impact representation in a profession where diversity is already an issue. A basic income guarantee would go a long way to changing the retention of current stage managers and allow better access for new stage managers to the industry, and personally make a year's worth of kicks to the fanny smart a little bit less. Now more than ever, I want to remind any stage management member or non-member, you have a committee fighting your corner. Please use us. Get in touch if you have any concerns as we return to work. We want to hear about it all. It helps us shape the work we do. We cannot do you justice without your voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Lizzie, and for speaking out for our stage management members. Just such a vital and central part of our industry. Where would we be without our stage managers? Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now we have Abiola Ogunbee, who is an actress and a writer. She is currently on the Equity Women's Committee, and also I'm very proud to say that I served with her on the core group who put together Equity's Safe Spaces campaign. Abiola, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Hello, everyone. Wherever you're watching today, thank you for being here. On the 16th of March, 2020, I was in my digs in York, waiting to hear the fate of theatres and other public spaces. I was performing in the UK premiere of Alone in Berlin at the York Theatre Royal for one more week, scheduled to go to the Oxford Playhouse for our final week. It had been over 3 years since I last performed on stage, and since our opening night in Northampton, I was reminded of all that's unique and special about live performance. The instant audience reaction, the multiple chances to refine your performance, the post-show get-together with lemonade, white wine, and crisps, with all the packets torn open at the sides for everyone to grab as they pleased. After the Downing Street announcement, a series of emails confirmed that the play would end, or rather had ended, with our final show the Saturday before. Another series of emails followed, where we expressed our sadness at not being able to say a proper goodbye to one another, but wishing each other well all the same. None of us could have known what was to come. Later, walking through the underground at Euston Station, the effects of this announcement sunk in more deeply. I walked past fresh posters of just open shows taped to the tube corridors, and I thought about people who were supposed to start previews that week or rehearsals, right through to people who had probably just gotten a call for an offer for a show that now wouldn't take place. Everyone had more to deal with, yet less work to support themselves. All this whilst dealing with the mental and physical effects of an outbreak, now a pandemic, on ourselves and our loved ones. There is a huge difference between being told that you won't be able to perform live for a year and wondering every month for a year whether the next month might be the one you can perform. Creative workers are used to uncertainty, but this has been on a different level to anything I've ever experienced in my career. Last year, I was connecting with my friends around the world. We had no idea where the arts industry was heading, but art was still part of our everyday lives. We were watching series, trying to write, reading books, plays. We were trying. But we were also evaluating how we wanted to work moving forwards, with more energy, with less overwhelm, with more time to invest in our craft and make contributions to society with it and to build a life with it. We wanted to be respected. We still do. The universal realities of our professions and creative work need to be better supported. Periods of rest happen in all tiers of this industry. And even in that rest, we are learning, we are working, we are networking, we are doing all that we can to keep ourselves ready for the first day of rehearsal. A basic income would help creative workers meet financial needs, continue professional development, and gain skills for supporting trades with higher entry requirements and salaries, allowing us to contribute to the economy further with our already transferable and highly sought after skill, our creativity. To create change that supports a new generation of creatives from all backgrounds and improves the working lives of existing ones, it will take listening to uncomfortable truths and recognizing the spectrum of experiences that all our members go through, not just those in our circles or those that we can identify with. It will also take working from a place where it's not about comparing our actions to the past and having a, well, at least it's better than attitude. It's about thinking of the generations whose ideas and opinions are not yet formed and creating agreements that make them feel safe and more than disposable vessels for a piece of work. Creative workers are some of the most determined, resourceful, ambitious, resilient, and optimistic people I know. They were before March the 16th last year, and they still are today. You are important to the economy, the workforce, and the culture of wherever you work. I hope if you're watching this, you know this both today and when you once again can see, hear, and feel that appreciation reflected back again to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abiola. That's a fantastic way to end the contributions from our members. Much appreciated, as always. Finally, now I'd like to hand, and I apologize for this rather hazy linoleum gauze I seem to have in front of me. And I'd like to hand over to our General Secretary, Paul Fleming.
Hello, thank you, Maureen. And it's an intimidating set of speakers to try and follow, because I think there's nothing that one can say better or more clearly than what's been said already. And after 12 months of this weird lockdown, things, as I look out the darkened window, seem an awful lot closer to 2020 in some respects than they might otherwise. And I think what's really important to think about today is not just how difficult the year has been, but where the great successes have been as well. And let's be honest and celebrate those successes of our members too. Now, that's it. We managed to achieve an improvement on pretty much every single agreement we have in theatre. You have the T45 provisions that Jasa mentioned earlier. We mentioned £250 million worth, £250,000 worth of broken stage management buyouts that we saw paid out. £1.3 million paid out by your union to your fellow members who were most in need. £10 million of royalties distributed, a record by the union since the industry closed. We secured a self-employment income support scheme. We won a £500 million insurance scheme for TV and film. And not only that, we kept on fighting over Christmas to make sure that over 70s are included in it in a way that the commercial market never allows. We've got health and safety on film and TV sets in a way that we never had before, a greater involvement of your union in your working life when you're at work in terms of keeping you healthy and safe. We've been part of the theatre roadmap reopening, and we finally secured it after 12 months, those no earlier than dates that we've been asking for almost a year. We've got a place on government advisory panels for future trade deals to try and make sure that we can protect members' ability to work abroad post-Brexit. And one additional freelancer support in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, showing up the failures of government in Westminster to look after freelance artists in England. And there have been partial successes too, and let's not overlook those partial successes for what they are. You know, on the 16th of March, there was no furlough scheme, there was no self-employed income support scheme. But there wasn't a self-employed income support scheme several weeks after the furlough scheme. And it was only us screaming via the TUC alongside other unions that won it in its imperfect form. And we have not stopped shouting about how poor it is. We've not stopped shouting about the exclusion of 40% of our members from any payments at all. And a much larger portion of our members, probably up to 70%, who've been excluded from any meaningful amount from that scheme over its running. And we've won a sector support package. And let's talk about how amazing that is. The government's support, 1.3 billion, is unusual because we're the only area of the economy that's been given it. Admittedly, it is barely twice the size of the bailout provided to EasyJet alone. It is grossly inadequate to protect a sector of the economy that is worth more than banking. But nevertheless, it is a unique achievement that is testament to the loud voice of Equities members and the strong work we've done with the Musicians Union, with BEC2, and with campaigning forces across our industries. And where did those successes come from? They didn't just happen overnight. They come from the strength of being in the union. And one of the most fantastic statistics I think we have is that those casts of shows that closed on the 16th of March, we had 75% density that day. Now we have 85% density on those same casts. Even though they've not been at work, more of them have been part of their union and more of them have been involved in the union than ever before. We've run our biggest ever DEPS meetings, our largest ever consultations, our Equalities Committee's support of the Equities Zooms In series have got us talking about issues that we've never addressed properly before. And let's talk about the level of profile we've had. The front covers of newspapers, interviewed by every major TV station and local news up and down the UK. How did that happen? Well, we've got debates in Parliament because 1,200 members in the space of 6 hours emailed not only the Conservative front bench, but their Labour opposites to get us mentioned in those chaotic debates in the early days of the pandemic. That is a remarkable success in itself. Some people will say that the union calling out the failures is not in and of itself a success, but liberation comes in the struggle. And it should be known by equity members that we would not be in the position that we're in now if it hadn't have been for your hard work, your organising and your sacrifice over the last year. Because of course, as individuals, we have all felt lonely and distant and powerless at points. But as a collective, we have stood strong in the same way as how your work has provided inspiration and support for that nurse on the bus on the way home from her shift, listening to that audio book, for the parents who've had to homeschool, who've listened and watched your work, for the parents who've had that weekend's relief with a Zoom children's entertainers party, or people being able to go out and do limited live entertainment over the summer. Your work has got people through, and that means that we are in the strongest position to make bold claims and changes for policy that positively affect our members' working lives. And when I left this office 12 months ago today, everything felt very unusual, but in a way, everything was the same. We were about to face a year of dealing with the effects of the pandemic of coronavirus. But every day, every year, this union fights the pandemic of precariousness that besets this industry, the pandemic of precariousness that besets every working person. We have a freelancified workforce, and in a way that's been set up to support only the engagers, only the government, only those who exploit the capital that you, our members, create wherever you work. And the debate has to revolve for far too long about work and money for work. We need to improve the quality of that debate with a basic income guarantee that means that we're now talking about money to live as well as money to work. For those freelancers who have to train and keep their skills in between jobs, they need support in order to continue being highly skilled professionals who provide so much value, not just to the economy, but to communities up and down the country and around the world. The idea of a basic income guarantee for creative workers is not pie in the sky. It is a reality. It is being brought about in the Republic of Ireland, as we've heard. It was brought about during the pandemic in Spain. In Nordic countries, in France, systems like this have existed for decades. This is a chance for the UK to catch up and to strengthen the workforce behind its biggest economic success story. In Scotland, in Wales, and in Northern Ireland, we have the chance to work with progressive politicians who have understood the case, who have heard the call for better support for our members, the workforce that powers the creative economy. In Westminster, they have had experience of the furlough scheme, which means the debate about these issues is more real than it has ever been before. There is a real window of opportunity for us to have a success that will make a real difference. And what will be the effect of that difference? Lots of you will have heard me say this before, but it's a function of every trade union to ensure that every working person can flourish as an artist, to give them a better work-life balance, a higher level of income, training, experience, the ability to connect with other working people. That is the function of a trade union, to encourage you to flourish as an artist. For us, we are also there to ensure that artists are dignified working people, that we've secured for them a dignified working life. And how do we do that? We do that through our cause, through our mission, through our movement, because the cause of labour is the hope of the world. A basic income guarantee does those three things. It means that when parents stood and watched very often the only piece of live performance they've been able to see this year, their children's nativity play, they haven't said to that child, oh, do you think you can be a performer? Do you think you could go into stage management? Do you think you could live that precarious artistic lifestyle? They've said, I know that there is a basic income guarantee that opens up these professions to my children from working class communities up and down the country. We are doing this not only to ensure a more secure working life for our members today, but to ensure that we do not lose talent in the future and that our industries are truly open to all. The hashtag for this event was "The Show Can't Go On." And of course, on a most basic level, that speaks to how the show has not been able to go on for the last 12 months, how it can't go on until at the very earliest June this year in a meaningful way. But it's also this union telling the government that this pantomime of precariousness, this pandemic of precariousness can't go on either. This industry is resilient, and it is resilient because it is full of artists. But it is resilient not because it is forced to be, but because it's part of its DNA. A basic income guarantee is a fundamental part of creating a fairer, more equal society and more accessible creative industries. And I have no doubt that no matter how big that is as a claim, quite literally, we can achieve it if we push hard enough and are united in that struggle.
Thank you so much, Paul. Fabulous way to end with those inspirational words. I too believe that, led by yourself, Paul, and with all of our fabulous staff and our other activists, some of whom have spoken tonight magnificently, thank you so much for that, and the people on our branches and our committees serving, and our councillors. I believe that we can make this happen, and I hope that you do too, and that I look forward to you all getting behind us and ending up with a basic income guarantee for creative workers. Just that quote from one William Shakespeare, it's a little male-centric, but hey, that was back then. "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune." That's what we're after. And on that merry note, I will say good night and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.